On the surface, the Carter family looked like the kind of family people admired. Their home in a quiet Ohio neighborhood was always neat, their smiles were always ready for photos, and their lives seemed steady and comfortable. But from the very beginning, there was something quietly unbalanced that only one person truly felt. Emily Carter, the older child, had learned early in life how to read the small things that others ignored. It wasn't anything loud or obvious. It was in the way her mother's voice softened more when she spoke to Daniel, her younger brother, or how their father's eyes lit up just a little brighter when Daniel walked into the room. These moments were small, almost invisible, but they added up over time, and Emily noticed every single one of them. As a child, Emily didn't question it. She believed love was something you earned, so she worked hard to deserve it. She kept her room clean, finished her homework early, and tried to be the kind of daughter who made life easier for her parents. When she brought home good grades, she would stand quietly in the kitchen waiting for a reaction. Her mother would smile and say, "That's nice, Emily," before turning back to whatever she was doing. It wasn't cold, but it wasn't warm either. It felt like something expected, something normal. But when Daniel came home talking about scoring a goal at practice or making a joke at dinner, the energy in the room shifted. Their parents laughed louder, listened longer, and celebrated more openly. Emily would sit there, smiling along, even when she didn't understand why the same excitement never came her way. Daniel wasn't a bad brother. He didn't try to take attention away from Emily. In fact, he often included her, asking her to watch his games or telling her about his day. But he moved through life with an ease that Emily didn't have. He didn't worry about being enough. He already was, and without realizing it, he became the center of the family's world. Their parents didn't plan it this way. They never sat down and decided to treat one child differently. It just happened slowly, shaped by personality, habits, and the comfort of familiarity. Daniel was expressive and outgoing, while Emily was quiet and thoughtful. One drew attention naturally, and the other waited to be noticed. As the years passed, Emily stopped waiting as much. She still did everything right, but she no longer expected much in return. She learned to celebrate her own achievements quietly, telling herself that it didn't matter if no one else made a big deal out of them. But deep down, it did matter. Every missed moment, every small comparison, every time her parents said Daniel needs this or Daniel is doing so well, it added a layer she couldn't shake off. She didn't feel angry. She felt invisible, and that feeling stayed with her even in the happiest moments. The turning point came on a warm evening in June, the night of her high school graduation. It was supposed to be one of the most important days of her life, a moment she had worked toward for years. She had stayed up late studying, pushed herself through challenges, and earned top honors in her class. As she stood backstage in her gown, holding her cap tightly in her hands, she allowed herself to feel proud. Just this once, she thought, things might be different. Maybe her parents would see her, really see her, and feel the same excitement she had quietly held inside for so long. When her name was called, Emily walked across the stage with steady steps, her heart beating fast but full of hope. She accepted her certificate and turned toward the crowd, searching for her parents' faces. She found them quickly. They were there, sitting in the middle row. But instead of looking at her, they were turned slightly to the side, talking to Daniel, who was sitting between them. He was smiling, animated, clearly sharing something important. Her mother laughed softly, and her father nodded with interest. It wasn't that they didn't care about Emily. They were present, they clapped when everyone else clapped, but their attention was somewhere else in that moment. Emily's smile didn't fade, but something inside her shifted. It wasn't dramatic or loud. It was quiet, like a door closing gently. She finished the ceremony, took pictures, and stood beside her family as cameras flashed. Daniel wrapped an arm around her shoulders, proud and cheerful, while their parents stood behind them, smiling like everything was perfectly balanced. And maybe to them it was. That night, as Emily lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, she replayed the moment over and over again. She told herself she was overthinking, that it wasn't a big deal, that her parents loved her in their own way. But no matter how many times she tried to reason with it, the feeling remained. It wasn't about one moment. It was about all the moments before it, finally coming together in a way she couldn't ignore anymore. For the first time, Emily understood something she had never been able to put into words. She wasn't unloved, but she wasn't chosen either. And that quiet realization stayed with her, shaping the way she saw herself, the way she loved, and the way she moved through the world. It didn't break her completely, but it changed her in a way that would follow her far beyond that small house in Ohio, into every relationship, every decision, and every hope she would carry into the future. The distance between Emily and her family did not happen in one moment. It grew slowly, shaped by silence and time. When she left Ohio for college in New York, it felt less like a new beginning and more like a quiet escape. She told her parents she was excited, and she was, but there was also a calm relief she didn't fully understand. For the first time, she was stepping into a place where no one compared her to Daniel, where no one expected her to fit into a role she had never chosen. New York was loud, fast, and full of strangers, yet somehow it felt easier than home. In the beginning, she called her parents often, trying to hold on to some sense of connection. The conversations were always polite, always safe, but never deep. Her mother would talk about the house, the weather, and most often Daniel. "He's doing great," she would say, her voice full of pride, sharing updates about his games, his friends, his plans. Emily listened, always supportive, always kind, but she noticed something each time. There were no questions about her long nights studying, her struggles adjusting, or the quiet loneliness she sometimes felt in a city that never slowed down. It wasn't intentional, but it was clear. Over time, the calls became shorter, then less frequent, until they felt more like a habit than a need. While Emily built her life in New York, Daniel remained close to home, naturally stepping into the space she had left behind. He became the center of family dinners, the one who filled the house with energy and stories. Their parents leaned into that comfort, celebrating his milestones, supporting his choices, and sharing his journey with pride. Emily saw it through photos and occasional updates, always from a distance. She didn't feel angry, not in a loud way. Instead, she felt like a visitor in her own family, someone who belonged in memory but not in the present, so she stopped trying to compete with a feeling she could never win against. She focused on her work, her studies, and building something that was hers alone. It was during her second year in the city that she started working part-time at a small publishing office, a quiet place filled with books, ideas, and people who valued stories. That was where she met Ethan. He wasn't the kind of person who demanded attention, but he had a steady presence that made people feel at ease. He spoke calmly, listened carefully, and noticed details others often missed. At first, their conversations were simple, about work, books, and daily routines, but over time something deeper formed. Ethan began to notice the way Emily paused before answering personal questions, the way she smiled politely when others talked about family, and how she often changed the subject without realizing it. He didn't push her, but he stayed present, giving her space without stepping away. One evening, after a long day, they walked through Central Park as the city lights reflected softly around them. The noise of the streets faded, replaced by a quiet calm that Emily wasn't used to. They talked about small things at first, but then the conversation slowed, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Ethan looked at her, thoughtful but gentle, and asked a question that caught her off guard. "Why do you always act like you have to earn love?" he said, his voice steady, not accusing, just curious. Emily stopped walking, the words settling in her mind in a way she couldn't ignore. No one had ever asked her something like that before, and for a moment she didn't know how to respond. She had spent so much of her life trying to be enough that she had never questioned why she felt that way in the first place. She looked away, searching for an answer, but nothing came easily. "I don't know," she said finally, her voice quieter than usual. Ethan didn't interrupt or try to fill the silence. He simply nodded, as if her answer made sense, as if it was okay not to have everything figured out. That moment stayed with her long after the conversation ended. It followed her back to her apartment, into her thoughts, and into the way she saw herself. For the first time, she began to question the belief she had carried for years, the idea that love had to be earned through effort, through perfection, through being the person others expected her to be. As weeks turned into months, Emily found herself opening up more slowly and carefully. She didn't share everything, but she allowed herself to be seen in small ways. She laughed more freely, spoke more honestly, and stopped measuring every word before saying it. With Ethan, there was no comparison, no quiet competition for attention. There was just presence, something steady and real that she had never experienced before. It didn't fix everything, but it gave her a glimpse of what life could feel like without the weight she had carried for so long. Meanwhile, her connection with her family continued to fade, not with conflict but with absence. Birthdays were reduced to quick calls, holidays became optional visits, and conversations remained surface level. Emily told herself it was easier this way, that distance made things simpler, but deep down, there was still a part of her that noticed the silence. She didn't feel the need to go back, yet she couldn't fully let go either. It was a quiet space in her life, one she had learned to live with even if she didn't fully understand it. Then one evening, everything shifted. Her phone buzzed with a message from her mother, something unexpected after weeks of little contact. It was short but clear, an invitation to come home for Daniel's engagement celebration. Emily stared at the message for a long moment, unsure of what she felt. It wasn't just about the event. It was about returning to a place filled with memories she had tried to move past, a place where she wasn't sure she still belonged. For a moment she considered ignoring it, staying in the life she had carefully built, but something held her back, something unresolved that she couldn't quite name. She looked up from her phone, her thoughts heavy but calm, and realized that this wasn't just a visit. It was a chance to face everything she had left behind, whether she was ready or not. Emily did not expect the past to feel so close the moment she stepped back into the house. It had been years, yet everything looked the same, as if time had paused and waited for her return. The walls still held the same photos, the furniture had not moved, and the quiet scent of home felt both familiar and distant at once. She stood at the doorway for a second longer than necessary, taking it all in, trying to understand why something so normal felt so heavy. Before she could think further, her mother's voice broke the silence, warm and surprised, welcoming her inside as if no time had passed. Her father followed, smiling in a way that felt genuine but slightly unsure, as if he didn't know how to bridge the distance between them. Emily smiled back, polite and calm, stepping into a space that once defined her but now felt like a place she was visiting rather than belonging to. The house was already busy with preparations for Daniel's engagement celebration. Voices filled the rooms, decorations were half set, and there was a sense of excitement that moved through everything. Daniel appeared from the living room, his energy unchanged, his presence as strong as ever. He walked straight toward her and pulled her into a hug without hesitation. "You made it," he said with a wide smile, his tone full of genuine happiness. Emily returned the hug, feeling a mix of comfort and distance at the same time. "Of course," she replied, keeping her voice light, though her thoughts were far more complex. She watched him as he moved around the room, greeting people, helping with arrangements, naturally taking the center of attention without trying. It was the same pattern she had seen all her life, only now she noticed it with a clearer mind. As the evening approached, the house filled with guests, laughter and music. The atmosphere was warm, and everything looked like a perfect celebration. Emily moved through the crowd quietly, exchanging greetings, answering simple questions, and offering polite smiles. People asked about her life in New York, her job, her plans, and she answered without going too deep, keeping everything easy and surface level. It was simpler that way. She noticed how conversations often shifted back to Daniel, his future, his success, his relationship. No one did it in a way that felt intentional, but the pattern was there, steady and familiar. Emily didn't react. She had learned not to. At one point, she stepped away from the crowd and stood near a window, watching the night settle outside. The noise of the party softened behind her, and for a moment, she allowed herself to feel everything she had kept controlled. It wasn't anger or sadness in a clear form, but something more complicated, a mix of distance, reflection, and quiet understanding. She wasn't the same person who had left this house years ago. She had built a life, found her own space, and learned to see herself differently. Yet standing there, she realized that some feelings didn't disappear just because time had passed. Still standing on the outside, Daniel's voice came from behind her, calm but direct. Emily turned slightly, surprised to find him there, away from the center of the party. He leaned against the wall, looking at her with a seriousness she hadn't seen before. "What do you mean?" she asked, her tone neutral but curious. Daniel shrugged lightly, his eyes steady. "You always do this, you come, you smile, but you never really stay. It's like you're not part of this anymore." His words were not harsh, but they carried weight, the kind that couldn't be ignored. Emily looked at him for a moment, considering how to respond. For years she had avoided conversations like this, choosing silence over honesty. But something about the moment felt different, as if holding back would only keep everything the same. "Maybe I learned that here," she said quietly, her voice calm but clear. Daniel frowned slightly, not fully understanding. "What does that mean?" he asked. Emily took a slow breath, not rushing her thoughts, letting the truth come out without anger. "It means you were always enough just by being you," she said, her eyes meeting his. "I had to work for it. I had to prove I deserved the same attention." The words settled between them, changing the air in a way neither of them expected. Daniel's expression shifted, his confidence replaced with something more uncertain. "I didn't know you felt that way," he said after a pause, his voice softer now. Emily nodded slightly. "I know," she replied, not blaming him, just stating the truth. There was no tension in her tone, no raised voice, just honesty that had been delayed for too long. Daniel looked down for a moment, processing what she had said, seeing their shared past from a perspective he had never considered before. "I never wanted that," he said almost quietly. Emily believed him. She always had. This was never about him trying to take something away. It was about something that happened without intention, something shaped by small moments repeated over time. "I know," she said again, her voice steady. And in that moment there was no anger left, only clarity. The noise of the party continued behind them, but the moment felt separate, like a pause in time where everything became real. For the first time, Daniel wasn't the center of attention, and Emily wasn't standing quietly in the background. They were just two people, facing a truth that had been there all along but never spoken. After a while, Daniel straightened slightly, his expression thoughtful. "You should stay longer this time," he said, not as a command but as a quiet hope. Emily looked at him, unsure of what to promise. "Maybe," she replied, leaving the answer open, not because she didn't care, but because she didn't want to pretend things were simple. As the night moved on, Emily returned to the party, but something had shifted inside her. She wasn't hiding anymore, not from herself, not from the truth she had carried for years. The house still looked the same, the people still acted the same, but her understanding had changed. And sometimes that was enough to begin something new, even if nothing around her had fully changed yet. The house felt different the next morning. Quieter in a way that made every small sound stand out. The laughter from the night before was gone, replaced by a calm stillness that settled into the walls. Emily woke early, not because she had to, but because her mind refused to rest. She sat at the edge of her bed for a moment, looking around the room that once held her entire world. It felt smaller now, not physically, but emotionally, as if she had outgrown it in ways she never noticed before. She stood, got ready, and moved through the hallway slowly, taking in the familiar details one last time before heading downstairs. In the kitchen, the soft sound of coffee brewing filled the silence. Emily poured herself a cup and sat at the table, wrapping her hands around the warmth, letting it ground her thoughts. She wasn't upset, but she wasn't fully at peace either. The conversation with Daniel the night before stayed with her, not as a burden, but as something unfinished. For the first time she had spoken honestly, and while it didn't change the past, it changed how she carried it. She no longer felt the need to hide behind polite smiles or quiet acceptance. There was a calm clarity in her now, something steady that hadn't been there before. A few minutes later, her mother walked into the kitchen, her steps slower than usual. Linda paused when she saw Emily, as if unsure how to begin. There was no crowd, no noise, no distractions this time. Just the two of them, sitting across from each other in a quiet space that didn't allow anything to be avoided. "You're up early," Linda said gently, her voice careful, almost hesitant. Emily nodded slightly. "I have to leave soon," she replied, keeping her tone soft but clear. She wasn't trying to escape, but she also wasn't staying longer than she needed to. This visit had already given her more than she expected. Linda sat down across from her, her hands resting lightly on the table. For a moment she didn't speak, as if searching for the right words. Then finally she looked at Emily, her expression more open than it had ever been. "Emily, did we do something wrong?" she asked quietly. It wasn't defensive or confused, it was honest, the kind of question that comes when someone is ready to listen, not argue. Emily felt the weight of it immediately. It wasn't just about one moment or one mistake. It was about years of small things, things that were never meant to hurt but still did. Emily didn't answer right away. She took a breath, choosing her words carefully not to protect herself, but to speak clearly without creating distance again. "You loved us," she said gently, her voice steady. "You just showed it differently." Linda's expression shifted, not with shock but with understanding that slowly settled in. She looked down for a moment, as if replaying memories in her mind, moments she hadn't questioned before. "We never meant to make you feel less," she said softly, her voice carrying a quiet regret. Emily believed her. That had never been the problem. The pain didn't come from intention, it came from what was left unseen. "I know," Emily replied, meeting her mother's eyes, and she did know. That was what made it complicated. There was no anger to release, no blame to place, just a truth that existed between them, clear and simple. Linda reached forward slightly, her hand resting near Emily's, not quite touching but close enough to show something had shifted. It wasn't a perfect moment, and it didn't fix everything, but it was real, and for the first time that felt enough. They sat in silence for a few minutes, not uncomfortable but thoughtful. There was nothing more to say that needed words. Some things didn't need to be explained fully to be understood. Emily finished her coffee, stood up and picked up her bag. "I should go," she said softly. Linda nodded, standing with her, walking her to the door. There was a pause before Emily stepped outside, a moment where both of them seemed to recognize that things were different now. Not broken, not perfect, just different. As Emily walked toward her car, she felt lighter, not because everything was resolved, but because she was no longer carrying it alone. She had said what she needed to say, and she had been heard. That mattered more than she expected. The drive to the airport was quiet, giving her space to think, but her thoughts were no longer heavy. They were clear, steady, moving forward instead of circling the past. At the airport, as she waited for her flight, her phone buzzed softly in her hand. It was a message from Ethan. "You don't have to earn love, not with me." Emily read it once, then again, letting the words settle in a place that had once felt uncertain. A small smile formed, natural and unforced, the kind that didn't need to be hidden or explained. For so long, she had believed that love came with conditions, that it had to be earned through effort and perfection. But now, standing in a place between where she had been and where she was going, she began to understand something different. Not all love feels the same, and not all of it needs to. Some love is quiet, imperfect and misunderstood, like the kind she grew up with. And some love is steady, open and easy, like what she was beginning to feel now. Neither erased the other, but together they helped her see herself more clearly. As her flight was called, Emily stood up, taking one last breath before moving forward. She didn't look back, not because she was leaving everything behind, but because she was finally ready to carry it differently. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough.